For generations of British people, Dixons was the gatekeeper to the future. It was the place where you first saw a CD player, the place where you pressed your nose against the glass to stare at the Nintendo 64, terrified by the price tag but mesmerized by the graphics. It was where your dad, wearing a Saturday anorak, would enter into a half-hour negotiation with a sales assistant named Gary about the necessity of gold-plated ScarLEDs. By the 1980s and 90s, Dixons acted as the ultimate gatekeeper for the entire British market. If they stocked a computer, it was a success, and if they didn't, well, it meant it was a fluke. They were the kingmakers of the consumer electronics industry. And then, they vanished. In 2006, the executives looked at a business that was still profitable and dominant, yet they made the calculated decision to dismantle it themselves. They executed one of the most ruthless, confusing, and arguably brilliant strategic pivots in British corporate history. They looked at the high streets, looked at the internet, and realized that the shop Charles Kalms had built in 1937 was walking into a buzzsaw. So instead of waiting for the buzzsaw to hit them, they dismantled the shop themselves. To understand why killing Dixons was such a massive deal, we first have to understand what it actually was. From 1937 onwards, the Kalms family built a hereditary empire that dominated the British high street. The story starts in 1937 in Southend. A man named Charles Kalms and his friend Michael Mindel decided to open a photography studio. They were in the portrait business, but they had a very practical problem. They needed a name for the shop, but the sign above the door was small and it only had space for 6 letters. Kalms just didn't sound right. Mindel was too long. So Charles did what any pragmatic businessman would do. He opened the telephone directory, scrolled through the D section until he found a name that was short, snappy, and looked good in block capitals. Dixons. There was no Mr. Dixon. The name was a shell from day one, but that shell became the vessel for one of the most aggressive expansions in retail history. During the Second World War, the business survived by taking portraits of families to send to soldiers on the front lines. But the real explosion happened in the post-war boom when Charles's son, Stanley Kalms, joined the business at 16. Stanley saw a world that was becoming obsessed with gadgets. In the 1950s and 60s, photography went from being a professional trade to a consumer hobby. Everyone wanted a camera, and Dixons became the place you bought it. By the 1970s, Dixons had outgrown photography and pivoted hard into the electronics boom. As British homes filled with gadgets, the company began importing consumer electronics from Japanese manufacturers and selling calculators, stereo systems, and other devices that still felt futuristic to most shoppers. By the end of the decade, Dixons was retailing video cassette recorders, eye-wateringly expensive machines that turned home video from a curiosity into an aspiration and slowly carried cutting-edge technology into everyday British living rooms. By 1984, Dixons was so powerful that it engaged in a hostile takeover of a rival that was technically twice its size: Currys. Currys was an established electrical retailer with a different store format to Dixons. After acquiring the business in 1984, Dixons chose to retain both brands, using Dixons stores to dominate town centre high streets while positioning Currys in larger out-of-town locations. Together, the two brands gave the group a far broader and more flexible retail presence than either could have achieved alone. Throughout the 90s, the company, now known as DSG International, was unstoppable. They launched PC World to capture the home computing boom, they launched The Link to sell mobile phones, and they even launched their own internet service provider, FreeServe, which briefly became worth more than the entire retail business during the dot-com bubble. They had the best locations, the best supply chain, and the highest margins. But monopolies breed complacency. And while Dixons was busy counting its cash in the late 90s, a bald man in a garage in Seattle was figuring out a way to sell everything they sold, but without the rent. Imagine for a second, you're in the year 2005 and you want to buy a digital camera. You want the sleeker new 300-pound Canon IX-US, but you don't want to buy it blind. Why would you? You want to know if this 300-pound thing feels good. You want to hold it to see if it fits in your pocket, and you want to know if the menus are easy to navigate. So you go to Dixons. You walk into the store on Oxford Street. a prime slab of real estate where the rent likely hits £500,000 a year. Inside, the overheads are racking up with every second. The lights are blazing, the aircon is humming, and a staff member named Steve is walking over to greet you. Dixons is footing the bill for all of this, covering not just the expensive lease, but Steve's salary, his national insurance, and his training. In return, Steve gives you a masterclass. He spends 20 minutes demonstrating the camera, letting you snap photos of the shop floor while he explains the nuances of optical versus digital zoom. You nod, smile, and deliver the line that haunts every retail employee. Thanks, Steve. I'll think about it. Minutes later, you're back home dialing up your broadband connection to visit Amazon or a grey market site like Pixmania. There, you find the exact same camera for £240 and click buy. The industry calls this behavior showrooming, and for a retailer with Dixons overheads, it's pure poison. In this scenario, Dixons absorbed every single cost of the sale. They paid the rent, the lights, and Steve's salary, while Amazon swept in to take the profit. Dixons had inadvertently become the world's most expensive, unpaid marketing agency for its own competitors. The math behind this was brutal because electronics are the perfect product for the internet. Unlike a sofa or a bespoke suit, a Sony TV is identical whether it comes from a glitzy Oxford Street showroom or a damp warehouse in Doncaster. It's a high-value, standardized box that's easy to ship, meaning the only real differentiator left is price. A high street store like Dixons carries heavy overheads that a fulfillment center simply ignores, pushing traditional retailers toward higher required margins, while e-commerce businesses benefit from leaner cost structures and lower operating pressure. In April 2006, the company announced plans to remove the Dixons brand from high street locations, citing mounting store costs and changes in consumer purchasing behavior. While most retailers in this position waste years fighting the tide by banning photography or launching confusing exclusive models to trap consumers, Dixons did something different. They simply accepted the math. They acknowledged that the physics of the internet had broken the small box electronics store forever. On April 5th, 2006, the company issued a formal declaration to the London Stock Exchange. The Dixons brand was being permanently removed from the high street. The stores in the absolute best locations with the highest footfall were spared, but the famous red Dixons signs were ripped down and replaced by a blue fascia reading currys.digital. Rather than announcing mass job cuts, DSG presented the move as a migration. Staff in Dixons would be expected to transfer to Currys as the brand disappeared from High Street. DSG managed the PR fallout by spinning a narrative of evolution rather than extinction. They promised the public that Dixons was simply moving online, launching Dixons.co.uk with a massive marketing campaign and a bold claim that it would become a pure-play e-commerce giant capable of fighting Amazon directly. But the promised online pivot quickly turned into a 6-year disaster. From 2006 to 2012, Dixons.co.uk were selling the exact same inventory as Currys and PC World at identical prices, distinguished only by the logo in the top corner. Worse, the company was actively burning money by splitting its marketing budget 3 ways. In the ruthlessly competitive world of SEO and digital marketing, they were effectively bidding against themselves, driving up the cost of keywords like cheap laptop only to split the traffic between their own 3 sites. The brand equity plummeted, and by 2012, the board accepted the redundancy and killed the site, reducing the name Charles Kalms picked from a phone book in 1937 to nothing more than a redirect link pointing to the Currys homepage. Regardless, the closure of Dixons was overall a genius move, and to appreciate this, we have to look at the alternative, Comet. Comet was Pepsi to Dixons Coke. They had hundreds of stores, sold the same white goods, the same brown goods, and the same computers. When Dixons quit the high street in 2006, Comet stayed. In fact, Comet executives gave interviews where they sounded smug. They talked about how they were committed to the high street, about how customers still valued the personal touch. They thought that they'd won and that Dixons had ceded the territory to them. They were wrong. Comet spent the next 6 years slowly bleeding to death. They were stuck with hundreds of expensive leases in town centers that nobody visited anymore, and were stuck paying staff to demonstrate products for Amazon customers. They tried everything from rebranding, discounting, and focusing on service, but nothing worked, and by 2012, Comet collapsed into administration. It was a messy and ugly bankruptcy where 6,500 people lost their jobs.
6,500 jobs are at risk after the electrical retailer Comet announced it's going into administration. It's one of the biggest high street chains to collapse since the demise of Woolworths 4 years ago.
And the government had to step in to pay redundancy packages. The brand vanished instantly and completely. While everyone else fought to stay open, Dixons ran from the high street, and in doing so, it ran straight into survival. But survival demands finding new revenue streams, and in the 2010s, the biggest one for a store like them would be the selling of smartphones. This presented a specific challenge for Dixons Retail. The company struggled with the mobile market because selling a phone is fundamentally different from selling a washing machine. It requires selling a complex financial contract involving credit checks, network commissions, and confusing tariffs, which is a skill set that the average Dixons staff member simply didn't possess. However, one company had mastered this dark art: Carphone Warehouse. Founded by Charles Dunstan in 1989, Carphone Warehouse was a sales machine populated by staff who were incentivized by aggressive commission structures. They had to know the tariffs inside out, and they could close a deal in their sleep if they wanted to. In 2014, the two giants announced a £3.8 billion merger of equals to create Dixons Carphone. On paper, this allowed a customer to buy a smart TV from the Curry side of the store and immediately sign a data plan to stream Netflix on it from the Carphone Warehouse side. They aggressively rolled out this vision by inserting glass-walled Carphone Warehouse zones directly into the massive Curry's PC World sheds. In reality, mixing the box shifters of Curry's with the contract sharks of Carphone created a culture clash from hell. The IT systems were incompatible, the commission structures caused internal friction, and the branding spiraled out of control. The store facades began to look like legal disclaimers, bearing the clumsy title Curry's PC World featuring Carphone Warehouse and Team Know-How, a confusing mouthful for any customer. The company found itself in the familiar, painful position of managing yet another dying brand. The pandemic in 2020 inadvertently validated a strategy the board had been building since 2006. While the lockdowns plunged most traditional retailers into an existential crisis, they offered Dixons Carphone a unique opportunity to prove their resilience. The company had spent 14 years preparing for a retail landscape without the high street, and the global shutdown finally allowed them to demonstrate that their model worked. When the government mandated the immediate closure of non-essential retail, sending revenue from the physical estate to near zero overnight, the company simply flipped a switch. Unlike competitors who scrambled to invent logistics networks from scratch, Curry's leveraged the warehouse infrastructure they'd been optimizing for over a decade to absorb the explosion in online demand. They even managed to digitize the sales floor itself by launching Shop Live, a service where staff standing in empty stores used video calls to demonstrate fridges and laptops to customers sitting at home. This success forced the executives to confront a hard truth about their other major brand, Carphone Warehouse. For years, the justification for keeping Carphone Warehouse stores open was complexity. The argument was that customers needed a physical guide to navigate credit checks, sign legal documents, and understand confusing tariffs. The pandemic shattered that illusion. Forced to buy online, the public proved perfectly capable of signing contracts digitally and passing credit checks without a salesperson holding their hand. The middleman of Carphone Warehouse was revealed to be redundant. By 2021, the company emerged from the pandemic with a ruthless new clarity. They were carrying far too much corporate baggage, and the portfolio had become a confused tangle of identities. Recognizing that maintaining 4 separate brands was inefficient, the board decided to clean the house. In October 2021, they initiated the one brand strategy, a decision to effectively delete the internal competition and rebrand the entire entity as Curry's PLC. Today, Currys has abandoned the futile war on price to pivot toward the one battleground where the internet cannot compete: service. They solidified this shift by launching Team Know-How, now integrated simply as Curry Services, which focuses entirely on the messy, physical reality of installation and repair. While Amazon might simply drop a washing machine at your doorstep, Currys built a service mode by offering to disconnect the old unit, install the new one, and recycle the waste, a level of logistical complexity that's incredibly difficult for pure-play online retailers to replicate. While most legacy companies perish by trying to protect their dying business models, Dixons survived because they were willing to execute their own history. They sacrificed the HighStreet stores to save the warehouses, deleted the Dixons website to consolidate traffic, and ruthlessly culled brands like PC World and Carphone Warehouse the moment they became irrelevant. They proved that in the brutal arithmetic of modern retail, the only way to avoid being eaten is to be willing to eat yourself. There's a philosophical paradox called the Ship of Theseus. If you replace every plank of wood in a ship, one by one, until no wood remains, is it still the same ship? The company that is now listed as Currys PLC is the Ship of Theseus. It has replaced its name, replaced its stores, and replaced its business model. There's almost nothing left of the company that Charles Kalms founded in 1937, but the entity survived. If you drive out to the edge of town where the retail parks hug the motorway, you'll still encounter a massive blue box emblazoned with the name Currys. Inside, you'll find the washing machines and laptops that mark it as the sole survivor of the British electronics boom. It outlasted the competition through a ruthless pragmatism rather than affection or price, succeeding simply because it was the only retailer brave enough to transform its own identity. But what do you reckon? Is Curry's strategy of self-cannibalization a stroke of genius? Or are they just delaying the inevitable against Amazon? Do you miss the chaotic charm of the old HighStreet gadget shops? Or are you happy to let the blue box handle your recycling while you shop from the comfort of your couch? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into retail history, give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you so much for watching, and as always guys, stay curious.